Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about the collapse of the Spanish Second Republic, or the Second Spanish Republic, la Segunda República in Spanish. So, first, the arrival of the Republic was, it was greeted really enthusiastically. The dictator, General Miguel Primo de Rivera, went into exile on January 1930, and the king, Alfonso XIII, went into exile in April 1931. And it was like this bloodless transition into a republic that was like the people really accepted at first. And yeah, it was like this new thing coming in Spain, and it had a lot of symbols like La Niña Bonita, which is the actual flag. It's this tricolored red, yellow, and purple flag. The royalist anthem was replaced by the Himno de Guerra, so like a new national anthem, and the names of streets and squares were changed, new names. And I'm really not going to talk about the actual Second Republic because that's like a whole thing, but I'm going to be talking about the collapse. So first I'm going to show you like the outline. So first of all, from April to June 1931, there was this provisional government set up. Then after this, from June 28th, 1931 to November 1933, a left-wing coalition government was actually ruling. Then from November 1933 to February 1936, a right-wing coalition government took over. And then from February 1936 to July 17, 1936, a left-wing coalition government took over again. But it was not as left-wing leaning as the first one was. Then from July 17th onwards, up until April 1st, 1939, General Francisco Franco declared the state of war, and here comes the Spanish Civil War. So, like I said, this republic collapses really quickly. It's set up in 1931, lasts 5 years, just over 5 years. And you have to understand like why that happened. So there were both external and internal reasons for this failure. The external reasons, well, they didn't have that much control. In October 1929, the Wall Street crash caused a huge economic crisis, not only to Spain, but to like every country in the world, harshening international relations and increasing the tariff of different countries. This meant that Spain couldn't export that much. So the main exports that Spain had, like citrus fruits, olive oil, and steel, were especially affected, and the Spanish economy did rely really heavily on those. So like this lack of exports led to a shortage of funds. The shortage of funds was these funds were needed for reforms to be carried out, like by the left-wing politicians. So these were stopped because they didn't have the money to actually put them forward. Apart from this, there was this sudden growth of European nationalism, leading to fascist and totalist regimes all over Europe. Germany, Italy, Spain. A totalitarian regime didn't rise in 1931, just later on, but nationalist pride was there. And Franco and other nationalist individuals liked the ideas people like Hitler and Mussolini put forward. And that was the right wing. The left wing were also stirred up because in 1917, the Russian Communist Revolution gave rise to left-wing ideals. So by this point, the Soviet Union had been set up. So there was extreme right in Europe, extreme left also in Europe, which, obviously influenced Spanish ideas and entered the political narrative of Spain. But these factors weren't really in Spanish control. Like, they couldn't really handle them because it's European things, But there are also internal reasons which arguably are the most important in understanding the collapse of this republic. Well, of course, any republic is going to face opposition. In this case, heavy monarchists, the bourgeoisie, aristocratic landowners, members of the church, conservative and military hardliners, all these people who tend to be more right-wing leaning opposed this republic because they like the power they had under the king and under Primo de Rivera. Well, the republic saw solutions to problems like the agrarian reforms, regional autonomy, role of the Catholic Church, and military reforms. However, these did not go well for everyone because for agrarian reforms, well, the powerful landlords and landowners didn't like this, so they had clear opposition to these. The Catalan Autonomy really threatened those who believed in centralist states, and so the people in Castile really hated this. The military did not like the reforms proposed by politicians, and Primo de Rivera and the anarchists caused huge problems. Well, Primo de Rivera, to understand, he was a dictator that went before the Second Republic, and in Spanish, I mean in English it doesn't really translate, but in Spanish, his dictatorship is called La Dicta Blanda, and it's because it was kind of soft. Well, blanda means soft. The reason why it's kind of funny is because in Spanish, the word for dictatorship is dictadura, and dura in Spain means hard, so dictadura, dicta blanda, like hard versus soft. And I just find that funny because it's obviously a joke, because no one thinks his dictatorship was that harsh, especially when compared to the next dictatorship that Spain would go through, which is with Franco, which was kind of hard. And no one jokes about that. Like, no one says, "Oh, it's a dicta blanda." No, people really do consider it a harsh dictatorship. Although when comparing it to Hitler, to Mussolini, it's not as authoritarian, I don't think. So it kind of weakens there. But in Spanish history, it is quite a strong dictatorship. Well, first, let's look at Primo de Rivera. Well, his priorities were La Patria, so the state, the army, La Patria. I think it's like the nationalist idea, belonging to Spain, the glory, the church, and the king, like the idea of this authoritative figure. And actually, under his dictatorship, the king was allowed to be there. So Primo de Rivera had the power, but the king was there. And this guy, Primo de Rivera, Miguel Primo de Rivera, does not, you can't confuse him with Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera, who comes later on. We're very different people. They are related, but... Well, Primo de Rivera, the first one, he was a centralist, traditionalist, a landowner, and furthermore, a military officer. So, of course, he didn't oppose the Second Republic because he wasn't there. He went to exile, but the Second Republic threatened everything he believed in, so his supporters did not like this. Well, all what he did in his dictatorship, well, he had these superficial and extensive projects, mainly focusing on infrastructure and monuments, like I said, like glorifying Spain. And he wasn't really economically wise. So his lack of economic judgment left the country with a huge budget deficit. I mentioned there were like two main factors, apart from other internal reasons. Well, it was Miguel Primo de Rivera and the anarchists. So here are the anarchists. Well, they had really strong roots in Andalusia and Barcelona, especially like the outskirts of Barcelona. And members of the proletariat had to gain from these proposed reforms by left-wing politicians. However, anarchists just wanted to destabilize this government that promised these reforms. The reason why is because they hated the socialists. Now, why? Because why do they hate the socialists? Well, actually, they were hostile to the left-wing coalition of the first government, which actually was mainly made up of socialists. They didn't like this first coalition government, first government from 1931 to 1933. And these socialists, it's because these socialists had collaborated with Primo de Rivera in the Dicta Blanda, but the anarchists had been prosecuted and squashed, so they considered the socialists to be traitors, and the fact that they had established a republic, that did not go down well with them. So they had violent strikes and armed insurrections, which didn't really threaten the government itself, but it decreased morale and confidence in the governing body. So those are the factors, and now I'm just going to give you a summary of the events that went down from June 33 to up till July June 31 to July 36. Well, this socialist government came into power June 31 and did do some of these reforms. I mentioned the agrarian reforms, the church, the autonomy, and the military. The assault on the church actually went really well. They had this constitution which declared that the state now had no official religion, and that the education, which was mainly run by the church, was going to be moved to a more secular form of education. So the church now couldn't be part of the raising up of young children. The agrarian reforms went kind of well, but not really. There was this law passed to redistribute land, but it was faced by a lot of obstacles from landowners. Some just left their land untilled and resorted to lockouts of farm workers. So yeah, this law was passed, but it did face opposition by a lot of farmers, and then not a lot of landowners rather than farmers. Oh, sometimes in some weird cases it's the same thing, but not always. Then Catalan Autonomy did not go that well for the government. They did appease them, but well, the provisions were presented to the court, like Las Cortes, which is the parliament, and it ran against centralist sentiment in Madrid. Catalonia actually got a statute that allowed them to pass for a separate parliament, the Generalitat, yeah. And that is still present today. In Catalonia today, you still get La Generalitat. And the debate with Catalan Autonomy is still really happening today. Well, they actually got official status for the language. So now Castilian and Catalan could coexist at the same status. It wasn't that Castilian was the main language, it's that they coexisted. And their flag and anthem were recognized. So the way I think it's kind of a success is because they did give all these reforms to those in Catalonia, but it was just to calm them down. But the fact that they still got these reforms kind of weakens the Second Republic, because now, I mean, if enough strikes and demonstrations in opposition, they could get things done. So, yeah. And then comes the military. And military, I think it's the biggest failure in the Second Republic. Well, since the 19th century, they have been rising in power, and of course, anything that threatened their power, that would be a no-no, a huge thing that had to be opposed, because the military obviously did not want to lose power. Well, General José Sanjurjo, who would go on to be one of the leading figures in the Civil War, did attempt a coup in August 1932. He failed, this was squashed, but just shows how this anti-republican sentiment was present in Spanish society. And there was this huge increased hostility from then onwards to, from most officers in the army to left-wing politicians. So by the summer of 1933, things were not looking good. It was a lot of disorder. The left, even the people in the left wing, did not know how to act against right-wing resistance. There was a lot of anarchist violence because they took advantage of the chaos to put down the government, and there was this the peasants were not satisfied. They wanted more reforms, and they had been promised reforms, what were they? Like, why are they not happening? So people got really dissatisfied with the left and started moving towards the right, leading to the right wing winning power in the November 1933 elections. Now starting the second period of the Second Republic, which is a right-wing government. Most things that were passed during the first government were overturned. The laws against the church, I don't think they were removed, but they were ignored. The church continued to be involved in education, and yeah, the state had no official religion, but they still practiced it and said, oh, if you're not Catholic, you're doing it wrong, you have to be Catholic. And also, landowners, by this point, when this second government was set up, they just ignored all the agrarian reforms because that would not benefit them. That would just benefit the farmers. So they don't want that. So they said, okay, these reforms, they're all great, thank you. I like them, but I'm not going to use them because they don't benefit me. They only benefit others, and I am selfish. So that's that. And well, the Catalan Autonomy was kind of handled well because in October 1934, a martial law was passed. Both the left wing and the right wing did not want autonomy. They wanted a centralized state to have more power, not because they want unity. No, they want more power, and that is why the right wing also went down hard on autonomy. And the left wing did not want this autonomy happening, but they still gave them autonomy, a certain level of autonomy. And the right wing, like I said, did not like this. Well, the right-wing Falange was founded in October 1933, which is actually still present today. The Falange, it's still a political party. It doesn't have that much power, nowhere near what it had back then, but it's still present in elections, and they usually win a few votes. The Falange was headed by José Antonio Primo de Rivera, which I always forget the relationship. I don't think it's his son, but he's a grandson or something like that of Miguel Primo de Rivera. So they are related. And this was founded in October 1933. And military officers who were right-wing leaning were actually favored in appointments. So if you wanted to go up in the rankings, you had to be right-wing. It is what it is, Well, there were outbreaks of violence occurring throughout this period, especially rebellions. And there was revolts, strikes, but the main one being this rebellion in Asturias by striking miners in October 1934. The army was moved to restore order, and this really polarized the country even further because the right wing, well, they said, oh my god, those who were took part in this, they were barbaric. And the left is oh my god, the army treated everyone so brutally, and there was some executions which should not have happened, and it was horrible. Well, the reason why this rebellion is significant, not only because they polarized the country even more, but because one of the commanders, if not the commander of the army sent there, was Francisco Franco. I think this kind of boosted his ego, hey, look at me, I can crush this rebellion, I can crush the entire country. Which he kind of did, but yeah. Well, by 1936, there were a lot of accusations of corruption, especially involving gambling, which was illegal by then. So this right-wing coalition government collapsed, leading to a left-wing government following the elections of February 1936. Now, it was left-wing leaning, but not as left-wing as it had been in 1931. It was slightly left-wing, it was kind of weak also because there was a lot of governments and people were fed up. There were a lot of people who believed in the left-wing, a lot of people believed in the right-wing, but they were completely polarized. There was no unity, and well, there was a lot of verbal violence. There's like documents proving this, and it eventually turned into physical violence and action. Civil War, the Spanish Civil War, which is really interesting, and I'll probably do a video on it in the future. Well, in conclusion, there were 18 governments in just 5 years. The main blocks of government were just 3, so 31 to 33, 33 to 36, 36 to 36, but there were internal governments, like changes within these coalition governments. Well, there was just too many, and what each government tried to do was too much, too quickly, and with too much passion. You had to feel the room, If it calls for a reform, do it. Don't try to push too much, because then you're just going to face opposition and feel hatred. Well, there was a lot of resistance, which was immediate and kind of defended, but it wasn't defeated, it was defended. Well, the left wanted to modernize Spain, move it to a more democratic, more republican style of government. The right wanted to return to the caste. So I don't know about monarchy, but totalitarian style of government. Well, they kind of got this under Franco when the Republicans were defeated in 1939. He brought about a return to a Catholic heritage, a territorial unity, and conservative values. And yeah, like I said, this was not about the actual Second Republic. This was about the collapse of it. There are really notable figures and politicians who did a lot of stuff, which are really interesting, and I'll eventually do a video on it at some point. I am Spanish, so I should do some Spanish history, not only British and American, even though I really find those interesting. But yeah, again, like I said, the Spanish Civil War deserves its own video, and then Franquism also deserves a separate video. Return to democracy also. Spanish history in the 20th century can be divided into key, especially from 31 onwards. It's clearly divided into phases. From before too, but in its Second Republic, Civil War, Franquism, and then return to democracy, and then full-on democracy. Return to democracy, and then parliamentary monarchy, which is what we in Spain are living through now. We have a king, but it's parliament has power, like in England. So yeah, that is the failures, the cause for the collapse of the Second Spanish Republic, and the reasons for it. Yeah. Thank you for watching. Bye.